A Supreme Court judge in Brazil has annulled the corruption convictions of the country's popular ex-president Luiz Inácio da Silva, widely known as Lula. This clears the way for Lula to run against Jair Bolsonaro in the 2020 election. And if he is able to do that, there's a pretty good chance that he could win. In fact, recent polling indicates that Lula would gain more votes than Bolsonaro, the only politician who would do so up against Bolsonaro, which is good news. Now, the judge decided to annul these convictions because of the fact that I would have hoped, and I wish that this was really about the fact that the charges against him were politically motivated in the first place, but that is not what the judge cited here. So the judge annulled the conviction over jurisdictional issues. So the court that tried Lula da Silva in this, again, politically charged case, happened in the city of Curitiba, and that is not where the alleged corruption took place. It allegedly took place in the capital of Brazil. So citing those jurisdictional reasons, the judge ordered that the conviction be dropped and that Lula da Silva be retried. So to be sure, it is likely that he'll be retried, but I do have some hope that there'll be justice in this case, because since he was originally tried, there has been really great reporting indicating that this was a politically motivated conviction. And Nando, I want to bring you in to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, this is unquestionably incredible news because, as you mentioned, Lula was incredibly popular. Lula was an incredibly effective president. He's a really just overall really remarkable figure in terms of actually getting things done and lifting millions and millions of people out of poverty, dedicating his whole life to the poor and actually delivering gains for a huge swath of people. I mean, people don't realize Brazil is a huge country. Brazil is bigger than every other country in South America combined. I mean, it's got like over 200 million people. It's one of the largest democracies in the world. And when this all started, this Lava Jato investigation, which led to Lula being imprisoned and crucially being barred from running in the last election, which saw the victory of Jair Bolsonaro, it was hailed all over the Western media as a brave example of anti-corruption working and bringing down corrupt people. You know, on the left, everyone always suspected that this was just a political hatchet job. And then thanks to the reporting of like Glenn Greenwald and the team at The Intercept Brazil, they revealed that the judge, the prosecutor who led the Lava Jato, was himself corrupt and was kind of working with the opposition constantly, coordinating with them. You know, they have like actual WhatsApp groups in which they're discussing like brazenly blocking Lula from running again to ensure a right-wing victory. I mean, this is just, to me, this is like the latest example that we've seen. You know, we saw a little bit of it in Bolivia last year. Ever since the pink tide took power in the early 2000s, the right-wing reaction in Latin America has been to use the courts to stop the left. It's called, you know, they do these things called judicial coups, where they kind of use judges and the courts, like not a democratic process, not even like a military coup. They just use the courts in order to block left-wing politicians from being in power. You know, like back in the 60s and 70s, they just used, you know, outright, you know, murdering and disappearing and working with the CIA to like disappear union leaders and stuff. But like they realized that they probably couldn't get away with that anymore. So they invented this new thing of using it through the courts. But that's been lately beaten back, both in Bolivia, a little bit in Ecuador, and now as we're seeing in Brazil. So it's unbelievably good news. Keep your eye out for next year's election. Bolsonaro versus Lula. I mean, this is like Tyson versus Holyfield. You know, like like if you're into like politics at all, I mean, outside of like the moral valence of it, obviously, if Lula wins, it would be an unquestionably good thing. But this is like, you know, fascism versus socialism, kind of head to head, mano a mano. Two of the biggest proponents of each wing going head to head. It's going to be like it's just gonna be like the thing to watch.
Absolutely, yeah. And Sergio Moro is the judge, the corrupt judge who was behind the political conviction and imprisonment of Lula da Silva. And The Intercept's reporting had access to logs, like chat logs between Sergio Moro, Bolsonaro, indicating that they were specifically targeting Lula da Silva for political purposes. Polling at the time indicated that da Silva was favored to win. He had a huge approval rating, and he was tremendously popular because of the fact that he lifted so many people out of poverty. And so, of course, much like the GOP here in the United States, if you're unpopular, as Bolsonaro is, all you need to do is rig the system to your favor. And he successfully and unfortunately did that by making Lula da Silva a political prisoner. And it feels wrong to talk about this story without giving Michael Brooks a voice, because he was such a huge supporter of Lula. I learned everything I know about Lula through Michael's reporting, and I wanted to share just a snippet of one of his illicit history mini documentaries that he would put together. This one, of course, was about Lula da Silva, and this portion that I chose to share with you guys really helps to understand what Nando was trying to explain here. So let's take a look.
Leaked chat logs published by The Intercept have proven that the corruption charges that put him in prison were politically motivated.
But how did Lula get such powerful political enemies? As Brazil's president from 2003 to 2010, he oversaw massive economic growth that brought tens of millions out of poverty. This success in the eyes of Brazil's elite was perceived as a threat to the social order and to their way of life. Lula himself understood this dynamic.
Ou seja, na América Latina, toda vez que apareceu presidente que tentou fazer política social, ele foi derrubado. Todas as vezes. A elite brasileira e a elite de outros países não aceitam uma política de desenvolvimento que tem inclusão social.
Lula has seen this cycle play out before. Back in the early 1960s, Brazil was run by a social democrat who ushered in a series of left-wing reforms, like the agrarian land reform and the nationalization of the privately owned oil refineries. The president himself was not a man with the left, but he was pushed thanks to vibrant social movements on the ground.
In the early 60s, many in the student movement were radicalized by the Cuban Revolution and saw the country's hard left turn as something to emulate.
The Brazilian elite were threatened by these reforms, even if they came short of revolution. Rather than respect the democratically elected president's mandate, they instead chose to support a military coup. Their plan received assurance and backing from the United States.
Of course they did. Of course they received backing from the United States. So unfortunately, Brazil experienced a military coup, and then later with Lula da Silva experienced, what did you call it, Nando, a judicial coup?
Yeah, the judicial coup. Yeah. Like they call it like lawfare is like the, instead of warfare, it's like lawfare. But yeah, watching that documentary reminds me of just what a remarkable figure he was. I mean, Lula da Silva was uneducated, worked at an auto plant, lost his finger working in an auto plant, rose through the labor movement, became one of the leaders within his union, and led in the late 1970s and early 1980s a series of wildcat strikes against his own labor leadership to protest the military dictatorship, which ended up collapsing in the mid-80s, largely thanks to the organizing efforts of Lula da Silva. He then ran for president many, many times. And it's, I just couldn't stop thinking of watching that video of the excerpt in Obama's memoirs about Lula da Silva, in which he compared him to a corrupt Tammany Hall boss. I mean, like Obama wishes he was the missing pinky in Lula's hand, like Obama wishes he had done anything as meaningful in his life as Lula da Silva did throughout his entire life, both as a trade union leader, founding the PT, the Workers' Party in Brazil, leading that party for decades, and then actually taking power and delivering the goods for millions and millions of people, leaving office with like a 90% approval rating. Just a remarkable figure, really, in many ways. So the way he was treated by the liberal establishment in the United States, which is very elitist and very condescending towards people like Lula da Silva, who did not go to college, didn't even finish high school, is very indicative of the rot that exists within American liberalism, because he was always seen with suspicion. He was not seen as an ally. And I think that's always worth remembering, that the liberal establishment here sees someone like Lula da Silva as a threat because it's a reminder of their own inadequacies in many ways.
I mean, just to give you a specific example, Lula da Silva succeeded in lifting millions of people out of poverty, whereas, and we talked about this earlier in the show today, under the stimulus package that passed after the 2008 recession under Obama's leadership, that led to growing inequality in the country because 56% of the relief went to the top 1%. So Obama engaged in austerity politics, bought into the fear mongering about the deficit, and that had some pretty severe ramifications for working people in this country. So that's a specific example of the inadequacy of Obama's administration versus what Lula was able to do in Brazil. But yeah, it's some good news, and I'll take it. I'll take more of this kind of stuff, because what gives me hope and what fuels me is hearing stories like this. And I remember when Lula was still imprisoned, he said something along the lines of, you can kill a person, you can imprison a person, but you can't kill an idea. And the ideas he had put out there they still existed, they were still popular. And even though Bolsonaro succeeded in rigging that whole election to his favor by making him a political prisoner, at the end of the day, the popular ideas will win. And so I'm really happy to see him not only out of prison, but to have these convictions dropped.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.